Xander had been on the planet Velmara for 3 weeks, and things had been going surprisingly well until now. He sat in the medical bay of the Velmaran research station, his skin an angry shade of red. The alien medic, a tall insectoid being named Driln, scuttled back and forth, making distressed clicking sounds while scanning him with a handheld device. "This infection is severe," Driln said, his mandibles twitching. "Your epidermis is inflamed and the tissue damage is extensive. You must have been exposed to a highly toxic substance. We must begin treatment immediately." Xander groaned, leaning back against the examination table. "It's not an infection," he muttered. "It's just a sunburn." Driln froze. "A sun-burn?" He repeated the words as if they were some cryptic incantation. Xander sighed. "Yeah, I was outside too long without protection. The star here is stronger than Earth's sun, so I got burned. My skin will heal on its own in a few days." Driln's antennae twitched in disbelief. "Your own star does this to you? And you simply recover?" Xander resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "More or less. It hurts, sure, but it's not fatal." Driln turned to his assistant, a smaller Velmaran named Orlt, who was staring at Xander as if he were a walking corpse. "Prepare the emergency containment unit. This condition may be contagious." "For the last time," Xander groaned. "It's not an infection." Orlt hesitated, his translucent wings fluttering. "Are you certain?" "100%. Driln's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Your skin is peeling." "That's normal," Xander said. "It's how my body gets rid of damaged cells." Driln recoiled. "You shed your flesh when harmed?" Xander exhaled slowly, trying to stay patient. "Only the outer layer. It's not as dramatic as it sounds." Driln and Orlt exchanged a look of pure horror. Orlt leaned in cautiously. "Does this mean all humans are capable of such regeneration?" Xander gave a half-hearted shrug. "It's not regeneration, it's just healing." Driln tapped his device, his large compound eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "This is highly irregular. No species we have encountered naturally loses portions of its dermal structure and survives." Xander shifted uncomfortably. "Well, humans do. It's not that big a deal." Driln clearly disagreed. "I must inform the station commander." Without another word, he scuttled away, leaving Orlt behind. Orlt studied Xander intently. "Does it hurt?" "Yeah," Xander admitted. "Feels like my skin is on fire." Orlt made a thoughtful clicking sound. "And yet you are still functioning." Xander smirked, or at least tried to, but his face hurt too much. "What, you think a little sunburn is going to take me out?" Orlt considered this for a long moment. "Your species is odd." Xander chuckled. "You don't know the half of it." Xander sat on the examination table, arms crossed, as Orlt continued to observe him with the cautious curiosity of someone watching an unstable chemical reaction. His skin still radiated heat, and every slight movement reminded him of the raw, stretched feeling across his shoulders. The Velmaran assistant had barely moved since Driln had left, his multifaceted eyes flicking between Xander's reddened skin and the medical scanner in his hands. The doors swished open with a sharp hiss, and a new figure entered. Commander Relth, the highest authority on the station. His elongated frame was adorned with the blue and silver markings of his rank, and his posture carried the rigid efficiency of someone who did not tolerate unnecessary crises. Driln followed closely behind, his antennae twitching in a way that suggested an urgent debriefing had taken place. The commander's gaze swept over Xander before settling on his peeling skin. His mandibles moved slightly, as if testing the words before speaking. "Driln has informed me of your condition, human." Xander sighed internally. "Right. And?" Relth tilted his head. "You appear to be in discomfort, yet you claim this is not a medical emergency." "That's correct," Xander said flatly. Driln interjected before the commander could respond. "Commander, this situation is highly irregular. His biology allows for spontaneous dermal decay with no apparent distress." Xander raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm definitely in distress. It just isn't life-threatening." Relth considered this. "Explain the full process." Xander exhaled sharply, already regretting the inevitable biology lesson. All right. When humans are exposed to too much ultraviolet radiation, our skin cells absorb the energy. If it's too much, the cells get damaged, triggering an inflammatory response. That's why my skin looks like this. He gestured vaguely at the redness. A few days later, my body sheds the damaged outer cells, replacing them with new ones. Driln made a clicking noise that Xander was beginning to associate with disbelief. You voluntarily expose yourself to a force that destroys your cellular integrity? Xander shrugged, wincing at the motion. It's not exactly voluntary. It just happens if we're outside too long without protection. Relth studied him for a long moment. And yet, you claim this does not permanently harm you? Right, unless it happens a lot, in which case it can cause long-term damage. Driln's antennae twitched. And you continue to engage in this behavior? Xander gave him a sideways glance. We have methods to prevent it. Clothing, protective creams, shade. I just underestimated how strong your star was. Relth turned to Orlt. Run a diagnostic comparison between human cellular regeneration and standard Velmaran tissue recovery. Orlt tapped at the medical console, his wings fluttering slightly as data scrolled across the screen. His regenerative speed is significantly higher than ours. The damaged cells are being replaced before widespread necrosis sets in. He paused. This is highly unusual. Xander snorted. For you, maybe. For humans, it's just another Tuesday. Relth's posture shifted slightly, his gaze narrowing. Your species withstands cellular degradation with minimal consequence. You recover from extreme environmental exposure. Do all humans possess such resilience? Xander hesitated. Depends on what you define as resilience. Driln's mandibles twitched. You are currently shedding damaged flesh in a sterile environment, discussing it as though it were a minor inconvenience. Xander rubbed his face, regretting it instantly as the raw sting flared up again. Look, this isn't even the weirdest thing about human biology. We can survive extreme cold, high altitudes, and even short-term oxygen deprivation. Some people train to hold their breath for minutes at a time. Others adapt to high radiation zones. We heal from broken bones, regrow damaged muscle, and even recover from organ injuries if given enough time. Relth's mandibles parted slightly, a gesture Xander was beginning to suspect indicated shock. You recover from structural skeletal failure? Xander nodded. Yeah. Bones knit back together. Takes weeks, sometimes months, but it happens. Orlt's wings fluttered rapidly. If a Velmaran sustains such an injury, we would require extensive bioengineering to restore function. Xander lifted an eyebrow. That sounds inconvenient. Driln's gaze lingered on him, calculating. Commander, if humans possess such regenerative capabilities, their potential as field operatives may be worth further study. Xander held up a hand. Whoa, let's not turn this into some kind of experiment. I'm not volunteering to get broken just to prove a point. Relth considered him carefully. Your species continues to surprise, human. Yeah, Xander muttered. We get that a lot. Xander remained on the medical table, feeling like some kind of science experiment under the scrutiny of the Velmarans. He had dealt with alien curiosity before, but this was something else entirely. They weren't just interested, they were disturbed. Relth's gaze lingered on him, his mandibles shifting slightly. There was clear calculation behind his expression, a careful assessment of just how much of a biological anomaly Xander really was. Driln adjusted his scanner, still eyeing the reddened patches along Xander's shoulders with something close to horror. His antennae twitched as he checked the readings again, as if expecting them to suddenly make more sense. Orlt finally broke the silence. His wings gave a faint flutter, a sign Xander had come to associate with unease. Your capacity for recovery exceeds our medical models. If this is standard for humans, I am forced to reconsider our understanding of biological limitation. Xander exhaled, feeling the heat still radiating from his skin. It's not like I'm invincible. We have limits. Driln's mandibles clicked. Yet your species functions despite injuries that would incapacitate most known life forms. This demands further analysis. Xander groaned. I don't need analysis. I need some aloe vera and a long nap. Reth's head tilted. Aloe vera? Xander waved a hand. A plant-based gel humans use to cool burned skin. Helps with healing. Driln's antennae curled slightly. A Velmaran expression Xander had learned meant deep consideration. You apply external compounds to accelerate recovery? Xander shrugged, regretting it instantly as the pain flared again. Sure, it's not necessary, but it makes things easier. Orlt tapped his datapad. Your species utilizes external biological agents to enhance natural regenerative functions? Xander sighed. That's a fancy way of saying we use medicine. Yeah, we do. We've got treatments for all kinds of injuries. Relth studied him for a long moment. Describe the most severe injury a human can survive. Xander hesitated. You really want to go down that road? Relth simply waited. Xander ran a hand through his hair, thinking. All right, people have survived being impaled, losing limbs, major organ failure. He gestured vaguely. We've got prosthetics, transplants, sometimes even regrowing tissue with medical intervention. Ort's wings fluttered rapidly. You replace damaged body parts? Xander nodded. Yeah, people can get artificial limbs, even mechanical ones. We've done heart and lung transplants for decades. Driln's mandibles parted slightly. You remove and replace critical biological components? Xander rolled his shoulders carefully, wincing at the pull of his burned skin. That's one way to put it. If something stops working, we find a way to fix it. Sometimes that means swapping out parts. Relth exchanged a glance with Driln. This level of adaptability is unexpected. Xander sighed. Yeah, we get that a lot. Driln napped his medical scanner again. And yet, your species continues to function despite the apparent fragility of your biology. Xander gave a tired chuckle. We're not fragile. We just break a lot. The important part is that we keep going. Ort's wings fluttered again, his expression unreadable. Your resilience defies conventional biological expectations. Xander smirked despite himself. Welcome to humanity. Xander rubbed his temples, his patience wearing thin. The Velmarans stared at him as if he had casually announced he could regrow limbs overnight. The way Orlt's wings had gone perfectly still suggested his brain was short-circuiting. Driln, still gripping his medical scanner, kept glancing between Xander and the data readout as if expecting to find some hidden error. Relth remained motionless, his elongated form tense with concentration. He finally shifted slightly, his compound eyes narrowing with what Xander could only assume was deep suspicion. Driln set the scanner down carefully, as if the mere act of handling it had become too much. His mandibles twitched before he let out a slow, deliberate breath. Your species engages in self-modification to maintain function beyond natural biological limits. Xander rolled his shoulders as much as his burned skin allowed. I wouldn't call it self-modification, it's just medical science. If something breaks, we do what we can to fix it. Ort's wings fluttered in short, sharp bursts. You do not simply endure injuries. You actively replace and reinforce damaged anatomy. Xander gave him a sideways glance. Would you rather we just keel over from minor setbacks? Relth's posture remained rigid. Your methods imply a disregard for inherent biological constraints. Xander exhaled sharply. It's not about disregard, it's about survival. If we have the ability to fix something, why wouldn't we? Driln's antenna twitched. Your approach to bodily integrity is unorthodox. Velmarans do not engage in such extensive intervention unless absolutely necessary. Xander gave a humorless chuckle. Yeah, well, humans don't wait for absolute necessity. If we can improve survival odds, we take the chance. Orlt glanced at Driln before turning back to Xander. You mentioned transplants. How extensive is this practice? Xander leaned back slightly, feeling the sting of his burned skin as he adjusted. Pretty common. Hearts, lungs, kidneys, livers. If an organ fails, we can often replace it with another one. We've even done full face transplants. Driln recoiled slightly. You replace entire sections of your anatomy? Xander nodded. When needed, yeah. It's not easy, but it's possible. Relth's mandibles remained still, his stare unreadable. Your species does not seem to accept biological failure as an endpoint. Xander shrugged. Nope. We fight it every step of the way. Orlt's wings gave a slow, deliberate flutter. And the success rate of these procedures? Xander exhaled. Depends on the complexity. Some are routine, others are risky, but the alternative is usually worse. Driln's antennae curled slightly. Your persistence in overcoming physical limitations is alarming. Xander crossed his arms, careful not to aggravate his burned skin. Why? Because we refuse to let nature dictate our limits? Relth finally shifted. Because it suggests your species is not bound by conventional biological constraints. Xander gave him a tired look. We're still bound by them, we just find ways around them. Drilna tapped his datapad absently. Your physiology is fragile, yet you compensate with relentless medical intervention. Xander smirked. That's one way to put it. Orlt's wings twitched. And you recover from these procedures? Xander nodded. With time, yeah, the body adapts. We've even developed ways to trick it into accepting foreign tissue. Driln made a sharp clicking noise. You manipulate your own biology to prevent rejection? Xander stretched his arms slightly, wincing as the burned skin pulled. It's better than the alternative. Relth regarded him for a long moment. Your resilience is not merely biological. It is a refusal to accept natural failure. Xander grinned despite himself. That's humanity in a nutshell. Xander sat perfectly still, watching the Velmarans process everything he had told them. The air in the medical bay felt heavy, as if the weight of their realization had altered the atmosphere itself. Driln's mandibles twitched erratically, a sign that his mind was running calculations faster than his body could keep up. Orlt's wings had stopped moving entirely, frozen in the kind of stillness that suggested deep, unsettling contemplation. Relth, ever composed, finally shifted his stance. His compound eyes remained locked on Xander, but there was a different kind of focus now. Not just curiosity, but a careful, measured assessment. Driln tapped something rapidly on his datapad, his movements sharp. Your ability to replace failing organs suggests an inherent instability in your biology. This level of medical intervention implies your species is constantly fighting against its own limitations. Xander shook his head. Not exactly. We don't think of it as fighting anything. We just improve what we can, when we can. Orlt finally moved again, though his posture remained tense. Your species does not merely adapt to environmental hazards. You actively alter yourselves to compensate for biological weaknesses. Xander exhaled through his nose. You're making it sound like we're walking science experiments. It's just how we survive. We have medical advancements, so we use them. Relth's mandibles barely moved as he considered this. And yet, despite all these interventions, you still suffer from something as rudimentary as solar radiation damage. Xander snorted. Yeah, well, we haven't solved everything. Driln's antennae flicked sharply. Your body has the capacity to recover from severe structural injuries, yet it remains vulnerable to prolonged exposure to a natural light source. This contradiction is highly irregular. Xander gave him an exasperated look. It's not a contradiction. Healing and resistance aren't the same thing. Orlt's wings fluttered slightly, though his expression remained unreadable. If your species prioritizes medical advancement, why have you not eliminated vulnerabilities such as this? Xander leaned forward slightly, feeling the sting of his sunburn as he moved. Because biology is complicated. Sure, we can patch people up, replace organs, even cure some diseases, but we're not invincible. We take damage, we heal, and we move on. That's just how it works. Relth's gaze remained steady. Your species does not fear injury the way others do. Xander's lips twitched in something close to amusement. Oh, we definitely fear injury. We just don't let it stop us. Driln's mandibles clicked rapidly. He turned to Orlt, exchanging a silent look before refocusing on Xander. Your resilience is not merely physical. It is a mindset. Xander nodded. Exactly. Orlt's wings gave a slow, deliberate flutter. You acknowledge pain, yet you do not let it dictate your actions. Xander exhaled. Pain is temporary. We deal with it and keep going. Driln tapped something on his datapad again, his expression still deeply unsettled. This perspective is highly unorthodox. Xander gave him a tired look. For you, maybe. For humans, it's just life. Relth finally straightened, his posture regaining its usual authority. Your species is unlike any we have encountered before. Xander grinned. Orlt studied him for another long moment before finally stepping back. Your condition will heal on its own, correct? Xander nodded. Yeah, give it a few days and I'll be good as new. Driln still seemed reluctant, but he finally set his scanner aside. Your biology remains deeply perplexing. Xander chuckled. That's humanity for you. Relth gave a final, considering glance before turning toward the exit. We will observe further. For now, you are dismissed. Xander carefully slid off the examination table, stretching as much as his sunburn would allow. Great. Next time, I'll bring sunscreen. Orlt's wings twitched. Sunscreen? Xander waved a hand. Long story. I'll explain later. As he walked out of the medical bay, he could still feel their eyes on him. He had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time they questioned human biology.